Here we are.
Here we are. You're the
Uh,
perfect person to be doing this with me.
I just wanted to start by saying what an honor it is to interview you. It's after, is it 25 years? At the end of 25 years of wholehearted, shining, countercultural, uh, challenging contribution to Canada's literary community. It's really an honor. Um, I remember when Pedlar first came on the scene, I was like in my early 20s, a young writer, and having just so much admiration for the the small, gutsy, and gorgeous ethos that was evident right from the beginning, and also feeling such gratitude for. I don't even know if you remember because we didn't know each other then. A really fulsome and wise letter, a rejection letter that you wrote me. And then feeling even more grateful once we got to know one another for your, just stubbornly unique example and generous mentorship as I started to make my way in small press literary publishing.
Thank you for all that.
Yeah.
I don't remember the rejection.
Yeah, it was really helpful.
I'm
um,
glad I didn't say, thank you for your interest.
no, you recommended books for me to read, and you gave me very good feedback on voice and some subtle things.
Good.
Um, so I wanted to start by asking you just to reflect on and talk about um, that tagline, small, gutsy, and gorgeous, as well as the other one, making no compromise with public taste. Just, where did they come from? What do they mean to you? How have they guided you? Has your relationship to them changed over the years?
The small, gutsy, and gorgeous was something Erin Moray said about the press way back when. And, I thought it was beautiful, but I also thought it was absolutely correct in terms of my vision for the house, because um, right from the very beginning, I knew to keep it small. That any business, probably, but especially in the literary world, that um, tries to grow beyond its audience size is just asking for trouble. And in terms of the gorgeous part, I love beautiful books. I love beautiful things, but I don't mean commercially produced things. I mean, I love um, deeply considered artwork and deeply considered relationship to the land, and deeply, I just love that kind of beauty, and felt that I had to get it somehow into the look of the books, and was really flabbergasted at the beginning to discover how much printing cost when you had this vision of beauty. Um, I asked Christian Morrison and Julie Gibb to design the first two books, although Zab was a designer in waiting, but she wasn't allowed to take on the projects. She was doing her master's at NASCAD, and her supervisor said, no more outside projects. So, but she said, just ask somebody whose work you already admire. So they did Sex Libris, the first title. And then I started asking for quotes from printers that other literary houses were using. And I had no idea how many to print. So the first print run was 1,500 and it cost me $10,000. And I was working on my own money, of course, because it was the first book, and I had to make 4 at least before I would be eligible. So there's the gutsy too. I mean, but I was so pleased with how the book looked. And in those days, I had to go about small booksellers in Southern Ontario with copies of Sex Libris, which I wrapped individually in tissue paper because I thought they were so beautiful. You know,
Hmm.
it wasn't a ploy. I was completely naive. It was strictly my relationship to the book and how much I loved the work, loved Antonella's work, but also loved how it looked. And over again, booksellers just started laughing with delight when they saw me, but they didn't forget me, right? And I still have relationships with some of those first booksellers to this very day because they learned a lot about me from my naivete and my love of what I was trying to place in their store. So, you know, the whole first effort with Pedlar was small, gutsy, gorgeous. Also, the relationships that I started to build were very gorgeous and probably gutsy, you know, because I was just ignoring the larger sellers. Um, I don't think Chapters Indigo was even a thing when I first started. Pages on Queen was, and Mark really got behind me. But it all had to be very local too, which is what small was. And I think Pedlar is what it is at this moment because of all of those people that met me in the first couple of years. I wasn't a young woman, I was 40, but well, that seems young now. You know, I was just an innocent to the whole publishing world. So I brought something quite refreshing. And I think my eye in terms of what I was going to acquire was also very refreshing to people. Um, these were works of great originality, odd experiments, is what Sonia Greco, you know, said I published through the years. But um, that
This is
was
where the making no compromise with public taste comes in.
well, that's exactly it. Um, I had to operate from my own heart and soul, or I would be lost. I was a therapist before I started the press. I'd done a lot of thinking about Jung's individuation. I was not about to take 15 steps backwards and do it the way people told me to do it. You know, I had to do it my way because I believed that was the way for me to grow more and more mature as I got older. And that proved to be true also. I mean, nobody but me knows the arc of my development, but, or at least not as well as I know it. And something quite intuitive was there right from the beginning, you know, because I waited for a long time before I found Antonella's work.
Mm.
And she had actually been rejected by a committee at the Toronto Women's Press, the Women's Press, that I was a part of. Mostly the committee thought that it wasn't the type of book for women's press, but I knew it was precisely the work for Pedlar. So I had the great honor of writing to her to reject her and then to make an offer.
Mhm.
And, you know, that book, as a feminist title, it was bold. It was certainly not making any compromises. And none of this happened because I was following texts about how to begin a business, right? You know, nobody said like start really loud, or, you know, nobody told me what to do.
Mhm.
And then small successes started to happen. I mean,
There's so many threads that in what you just said that I want to pick up on, but the one that's occurring to me most at the moment is just the way you describe the building of Pedlar feels like the way an artist describes the building of a work of art, you know,
mhm,
the following of intuition, the sense of um, not like having to find one's own vision and voice and not let the outside forces. I'd love you to talk more about publishing as almost like a work of art.
mhm. I just finished reading, I just have to get up to get it, this book. Celia Paul is a UK artist, has been working since she was 16, and she's 2 years younger than me. She's 63.
Mm.
Um, for way too many years in her life, she was described first and foremost as Lucienne Freud's lover.
Mm.
But they met when she was a student at the Slade in London. And she was 16 when she started. And she was there because she had been recognized, her talent, her abilities, her drive had been recognized by a high school teacher. And she was there. And then Lucienne happened by, and, you know, the world knows about his relationships with women, but who she has been creating her work has been a well kept secret, uh, not because of anything that she did or didn't do, except she's a woman with an art practice. Her work is um, what I find most interesting about the book is that she describes her early knowledge that she had to live alone. And Freud bought her a suite, an apartment that faces the British Museum, and she's lived there since she was 20. Through a child that she bore, he's the father. Her mother took care of her son through the week and she went back and forth, but she had a room of her own and she understood that she had to have it. And this to me is so radical, you know, that she understood her core so well, even at the beginning. And that we're not even talking about the production of her art yet. But this is, I think, a woman's issue, that you have to build around you a garrison somewhere that you live within to protect yourself from all the incredible noise about what you should be doing and how you should do it and who you are relative to a man and all of that, right? So to me, the production, you know, when I look back at the 120 20 titles on the Pedlar list. The feminist expression runs through all of them. But I think what happened along the way is that I took greater and greater risks because I realized that nobody was really watching. You know, I had this hope in the beginning that the press would be successful for the writer's sake. Even though I said I wanted to keep it small, I didn't really know what that meant in terms of building a supportive community and how big that would be. Now I know it's a very small percentage of the population who responds deeply to the works. You know, we've had it drummed out of us to not feel we can even approach this kind of work. I hear it over and over again. It's so difficult. It's difficult. It's difficult. It's difficult. So I think in the layering, you know, Celia Paul does a lot of layering of very milky grays and greens and blues, and that I respond to because there is something hidden in Pedlar Press, except for the very curious. Yeah, it's I've been involved in a 25-year enterprise that could easily be passed over by 9/10 of a room. Yeah. So I can't imagine anybody wouldn't say, as I said to myself, is this the way you're going to go?
Yeah.
Is this the route? Is this the correct route?
It's interesting. Another thing that I wanted to ask you about is the one woman show aspect of it, and I mean, I think you've been talking about that. Like, it sounds to me like it needed to be that way because it was a very deep expression for you, but that I imagine also had its difficulties. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, what pops into my mind is being chastised by at least 1 year's jury, and maybe it was going on more than just 1 year at Canada Council, that I was using the pronoun I in my applications. I do this and I do that. And I hope you can see the insanity of that. I mean, to say we, to please them, when it was only ever I, at least the I statements were about something I had done. I didn't take all the credit, you know, if there was a we, credit was given, but they didn't like that I said I. And how can you possibly explain in a grant application the meaning, the purpose, the vision, the tensions, the obstacles,
Yeah.
the difficulties if you work with even one other person, um, and you're a person like me, it slows things down, right? I mean, I truly believe that I served Canada and literary Canada best by working alone.
Mm.
I'm not a horse champing at the bit. It's not about speed or feeling like I'm right or anything. It's just that my vision is odd and hard to explain in words.
Yeah.
And so to try to explain, uh, finally, it had no meaning.
Mm. And and not only that, but also it strikes me, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that there has been a sort of a sacrifice at the heart of it, and a it seems to me, very intentional one. But you know, one of the other taglines are that I know that you've used is for yourself as a guiding light is "Don't fall in love with the boys' machinery," um, and in the staying small and the resisting the imperatives of capitalism, uh, and um, you've had to sort of um, live live financially on the margins too. It's been a gift,
Mhm.
your work.
Right. Um,
I
uh,
guess I guess I'm asking because I struggle with this now as the publisher of a press that focuses exclusively on poetry, which is a bit of its own kind of insanity, and oddness. And I struggle with like the how to pay my freelancers a living wage, how to survive myself, in the economic pressures.
right. I mean, uh, if the current atmosphere, 2021 atmosphere about paying people their due and so on, and not using people of color or Indigenous people in a way that presses on their livelihood, this kind of thing. If that had been the atmosphere, having to prove that one was paying properly, I would not have survived, because in the early days, I was asking of others the same thing that I was asking of myself, which was to participate in gift culture. Many, many times I received a beautiful image of an artwork and did not pay the artist. I remember the day when I first started being able to offer $150 to someone who would give permission to use an artwork, right? But I mean, early on, people were just doing it to support the house because they liked the vision. And so I'm trying to speak about others as well as myself. There were a lot of people who did not get paid what their work was worth,
Mhm.
including me.
Mhm.
Um, that is true for me right through to, I always pay myself for the year's work the following June. So although I worked full time last year, I paid myself $9,000 this past June. That isn't as rare as you might think, but it does describe a bit about the pandemic and how hard it was to sell books. But um, the obvious stuff is I don't have children. I'm not dug in to a certain level of financial demand. I could get around it. You know, in Toronto, I lived in a place that was $600 a month. In Toronto, that was unheard of, right? And it was because my neighbors were really kind to me. But I found my way, you know, I shop at secondhand stores, I buy used things, um, it just seemed, it seemed so important. And at the same time, there was a huge dilemma because I was sacrificing not money, but my own writing career. That's the real sacrifice that was happening, right?
Mhm.
And always I was thinking, if I can live on this little as a publisher, why am I not giving it all up immediately to live on this little as a writer, right? But I know there's a great need for me to serve. And it was clear as a publisher that I was serving. And so that balanced the sacrifice. You know, I was serving the authors, I was serving everybody who used to come out in droves to the launches in Toronto, and I was serving literary Canada. You know, I had people like Ellen Seligman come up to me in later years after I had proven the press. I guess it was at Kate's celebration at Trillium. She came up to me and said how much she envied me in my life as a publisher because I could choose what I felt was important, whether it was going to be something that made the profit or not, right? And those days are long gone for the big houses. But the bigger sacrifice was always my own vision for my own writing.
Mhm.
So, you know, that was the thing then, and still when I even speak of it, that makes me want to throw up, right?
Mhm.
It's really deep in my core that that was a dream that was slowly passing me by.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And now?
Well, uh, just before the pandemic, I had a little sign on the kitchen island in St. John's that said, making others look good for 23 years. It wasn't for visitors, it was for me, right?
Mhm.
It was not a message to visitors, it was a message to myself. Like, when are you going to stop? You know, do it now. And then the pandemic came, and then I stopped. I just turned to Monica Kidd and said, that's it, we're finished. Nobody's going to buy a house in a pandemic. We're done. And figured out when the right time would be to make the announcement last October, and then that was it. So I'd been working on my own writing all through, but not full time. It still isn't full time because I'm still managing a lot of Pedlar. But my novel of many years' work was released, and people seem to really be digging it, those who aren't afraid of it.